Looks like we'll have to bop our way back when we watch The Warriors tonight on Garage Movie Reviews. Hello and welcome to Garage Movie Reviews. I'm Levi, the Garage Movie Guy, and tonight we're going to talk about a cult classic film from 1979, The Warriors. Growing up, I was not cool enough to know what The Warriors was. In fact, I didn't know the movie existed until 2005 when they released the Ultimate Director's Cut. This DVD release coincided with a video game developed by Rockstar Toronto. I was big into video games at the time, and the buzz around The Warriors mentioned that the director was interested in comic books when he developed the movie way back in the 70s. Being a big fan of comics and movies, I just had to check this movie out. I went and bought the DVD, and by the time the game came out, I was already a fan. The Warriors takes place in a fictionalized version of New York City, where colorful gangs rule the streets. Cyrus, the leader of the largest gang in the city, calls a summit and invites all the other gangs. The Warriors send 9 of their emissaries from their home turf of Coney Island all the way up to the Bronx. Cyrus, played by Roger Hill, gives a speech on why all the gangs should band together.
Can you count, suckers? Can you?
But his message of cooperation is interrupted when an assassin steps forward. The Warriors are quickly framed for the assassination and must spend all night fighting their way back to Coney Island through gangs and enemy territories. Although Walter Hill wanted to cultivate a sort of hyper-realism for the film, he wanted it to seem as authentic as possible, so he set forth to cast the entire movie in New York City. A couple of standout performances from the Warriors come from Michael Beck as Swan, the war chief and de facto leader of the Warriors. He plays Swan as a stoic leader and a man of few words. Opposed to him is Ajax, played by James Remar. He plays the hot-headed loudmouth that has some of the most interesting lines in the film.
I'll shove that bat up your and turn you into a popsicle.
Cyrus's assassin probably looks familiar to some of you. He was played by David Patrick Kelly, most recently known for his role as Jerry Horn in Twin Peaks. But for me, he'll always be T-Bird from The Crow.
Hey! Fire it up! Fire it up!
One of the most memorable characters in the film is known only through her voice and her lips. An unnamed DJ communicates information to the gangs via her broadcast.
Remember, boppers, be looking good.
If you were a kid in the 90s, you might recognize Lynn Thigpen as the chief from Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
All right, detectives.
Rounding out the 9 delegates from Coney Island, we have Dorsey Wright as Cleon, David Harris as Cochise, Tom McKittrick as Cowboy, Marcelino Sanchez as Rembrandt, Terry Michos as Barman, Brian Tyler as Snow, and Thomas G. Waits, who played Fox. Waits is the only warrior who is uncredited in the film. He requested that his name be removed when he was fired after creative differences with the director. He's since stated that this is one of the few things in his life that he regrets. As I said before, director Walter Hill was very interested in comic books at the time. He even wanted to add a few elements to the movie to push this idea, like splash pages and chapter markings. He even had an intro lined up to be read by Orson Welles. This intro would tie the warrior's tale to a story about 10,000 Greek soldiers lost in the Persian Empire. The best Hill was able to do with his time and budget was add a few wipes to make it feel like a page was being turned. However, in 2005, he was able to add all of these elements to the story that he originally wanted to. Of course, Orson Welles was not alive to read the intro, so Hill himself provides the narration.
Theirs was a story of courage.
And the soundtrack by Barry DeVorson is a really cool one that he calls a synthesized rock and roll track. If you're into synth music at all, you should at least check out the soundtrack to The Warriors. And it's impossible to talk about The Warriors without talking about the myriad gangs that they created for this film. Dozens and dozens of gangs were included in the script, only a few made it to the screen, but you've got the Gramercy Riffs, Turnbull ACs, the Lizzies, and the crowd pleaser, the Baseball Furies. This particular gang was born from Hill's love of baseball and the costume designer Bobby Mannix's edition of the makeup, which was heavily inspired by Kiss. Another gang-related film was being produced at the time called The Wanderers, so when The Warriors reached post-production, they kicked it into overdrive with 3 separate editing bays working around the clock. They succeeded and released in theaters in February of 1979, while The Wanderers didn't release until July. Shortly after release, there were reports of violence outside theaters showing The Warriors, including at least one fatal stabbing. In response, Paramount elected to halt all TV and radio advertising and reduce all newspaper advertising to the title, time, and theater of the film. They also offered to pay extra security for any venues that wanted it, and offered to let any theaters back out of their obligation to show the film if they wanted to. 2 weeks later, after no new reports of violence and positive critical reviews, the ad campaign started back up and the film became a financial success. In the past few decades, the impact of this movie on pop culture has become widespread. There are a couple of iconic lines from the film, but there's one in particular that's resonated through TV and film, and especially the music industry.
Warriors, come out to play.
A lot of artists have used that line, but two of my favorite instances are the release of the album Come Out and Play by Twisted Sister, which opens with frontman Dee Snider clinking bottles together and chanting, "Twisted Sister, come out and play." And we can't leave out the Wu-Tang Clan. On the second track of their debut album, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers, you can hear ODB shout, "Warriors, come out and play." I was kind of excited to find out that Hulu was producing an hour-long drama series based on the Warriors. It's being developed by Joe and Anthony Russo, the brothers that directed Captain America Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War. There was a film remake that was talked about in 2005 where the movie would be set on the West Coast, and Tony Scott was connected to this, but unfortunately Mr. Scott passed away in 2012 and nothing came of this. But with this Hulu series on the way, I'm kind of excited. I think it could be really interesting, especially with this kind of talent behind it. It's easy for me to see why this movie is such a cult classic for so many people. In fact, if I had seen it as a teenager, I think it would have made quite the impression on me. It is an entertaining movie, and I feel like any shortcomings it has are kind of washed away by the whole, which is a great experience. But that being said, I think a lot of my fun with this movie comes from the fact that I spent so many hours in the video game. And if any of this talk of the game has gotten you interested on it and you have a PS4, well, you're in luck because there is a digital version of this available right now. And if I take a step back and look at the movie itself, it does have a lot of elements that you can find in video games, especially the genre of the side-scrolling brawler games like Streets of Rage. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the Warriors inspired this whole genre because it's built upon getting from one location to another and encountering these weirder and tougher enemies along the way. So who should watch this movie? Well, if you're like me and you're a movie buff, a comic book collector, and a video game nerd, you might check this movie out. If you wanted to see Lord of the Flies plus Mad Max in New York City, this is your ticket. And finally, if, like me, you grew up on side-scrolling brawlers like Streets of Rage or Double Dragon, then you owe it to yourself to see this movie because I think a lot of those games owe their existence to this movie. But that's enough from me. I want to hear from you. Is this your first time hearing about the Warriors? Are you a warhead? I don't think that fans call themselves that. Did you play the 2005 video game? If so, I want to relive the glory days. Comment down below. But until next time, I'm Levi the Garage Movie Guy saying, see you in my garage. The Wanderers. If you're looking for a little bit of the ultra-violence, come out to play. 36 Chambers. Boom, boom. I love it. Here's to you, T-Bird. 36 Chambers. Why can't I say that? I know it. Fire it up.